My life ended on a Tuesday. Not with a bang, but with a post-it note stuck to the fridge. It was a perfectly normal Tuesday, the kind where you come home, kick off your shoes, and expect the usual quiet hum of an evening settling in. Sarah usually had dinner ready, or at least a plan for it. But the apartment was silent, too silent. I knew instantly something was wrong. That cold dread, like an ice cube melting in your stomach, started. I walked through the empty rooms calling her name. No answer. Her car was gone. Her favorite coat was gone from the hook by the door. And then I saw it, a small yellow square, stark against the stainless steel. I can't do this anymore. I am sorry. I've left. That was it. 4 sentences. 4 sentences to dismantle 10 years of marriage, of shared dreams, of everything I thought we were building. I reread it, staring at her neat handwriting, as if the words would change, rearrange themselves into a joke, a test, anything but this. But they stayed the same. I sank onto the kitchen floor, the linoleum cold against my skin. The post-it still clutched in my hand. The first few hours were a blur of disbelief and raw pain. I called her phone, straight to voicemail. Her parents. They sounded confused, said she hadn't mentioned anything. My friend. They offered platitudes, sympathy. But nothing could touch the hole that had just been ripped through my chest. Then came the second blow, the one that made the first seem almost gentle. It was a text message, not from her, but from her sister Jenny. Jenny was always blunt. Heard about Sarah. Look, I know it hurts, but she told me a while ago. Said she met someone, Dr. Julian Richardson, a surgeon, really rich. The name hit me like a physical punch. Dr. Julian Richardson. A surgeon rich, my mind reeled. Sarah had left me for another man. Not just any man, but a rich surgeon. Cliché was almost comical, if it hadn't felt like my entire world was collapsing around me. I remembered Sarah mentioning a charity gala a few months back, a fancy event for the hospital. She'd been so excited, talking about the important people she'd met. I dismissed it, just another social event. Now, the pieces clicked into place, forming an ugly picture. Dr. Julian Richardson. I knew the name vaguely. He was one of those hotshot doctors, always in the news for some groundbreaking surgery or a big donation. A brilliant mind, everyone said. And now, he was the man who had stolen my wife, my future, my very sanity. I didn't cry then. The tears would come later, in torrents that would leave me gasping for air. At that moment, there was only a cold, burning anger. A betrayal so profound, it felt like a physical wound. Sarah, my Sarah, the woman I had promised forever to, had walked out on me for a surgeon. A rich, successful surgeon. What did I have? I was a lawyer. A good one. But not the kind that made headlines or donated millions. Just a guy, grinding away, building a life, or so I thought. The thought, I'm a lawyer, echoed in my head. A lawyer. And he was a surgeon. The universe, it seemed, had a twisted sense of humor. This was the kind of thing you read about in trashy novels, not the kind of thing that happened to you. But it was happening. My wife was gone, and she was with him. Dr. Julian Richardson. I called Jenny back. My voice was hoarse. How long? A few months, maybe. She said she felt stifled, that you weren't ambitious enough, that he offered her a different life. Stifled. Not ambitious enough. Those words stung more than anything else. I worked hard. I provided, I loved her. Was that not enough? Was I not enough? The questions spun in my head, a dizzying spiral of self-doubt and rage. The next few days were a waking nightmare. I went through the motions at work, a zombie in a suit. My colleagues noticed, but I deflected their questions, mumbled about a family emergency. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone the truth. The shame, the humiliation was too great. Every morning I woke up with a crushing weight on my chest, the reality hitting me fresh each time. Sarah was gone. With him, I went home to an empty apartment every night. Her scent, her things, they were everywhere, mocking me. I started sleeping on the couch, unable to bear the emptiness of our bed. I ate microwave meals, my appetite long gone. The post-it note, I had taped it to the bathroom mirror, a constant, brutal reminder of my shattered life. I spent hours scrolling through social media, a morbid fascination drawing me to Dr. Julian Richardson's public profile. Pictures of him smiling, confident, surrounded by other powerful people. He looked exactly like the kind of man Sarah would leave me for. Handsome, charismatic, radiating success. He even had a perfect, slightly tanned smile. It made my stomach churn. I was a mess, a broken man, adrift in a sea of despair. I knew I needed to start divorce proceedings, but the thought of it paralyzed me. It was too final, too real. It would mean truly accepting that she was gone, that our life together was over. And I wasn't ready to accept that. I might never be. My phone rang. It was an unknown number, a law firm. My mind was still foggy with grief, but I answered anyway. Mr. Davis? This is Miller and Associates. We've heard good things about your work. We have a complex case, high profile. Are you taking on new clients? I almost hung up. My firm, a smaller practice, focused on corporate law. We didn't do big, flashy cases. I was barely holding myself together, let alone taking on a complex, high-profile one. But then the senior partner's name came to mind. John Miller. One of the best, most ruthless litigators in the city. If he was calling me, it had to be a significant case. And I needed a distraction. I needed money. The divorce would cost a fortune. I had to keep my head above water. I am listening, I said, my voice rough. Excellent. It's a malpractice suit. A big one. We need someone sharp, tenacious. We think you are the man for the job. Can you come in tomorrow morning, 9 a.m.? We'll brief you. A malpractice suit of all things. My mind flashed to Dr. Julian Richardson, the rich surgeon. A chilling wave passed through me. No, it couldn't be. Just a coincidence. Malpractice suits happened all the time. Still, the thought lingered, a tiny dark seed of possibility. I'll be there, I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. I didn't know then just how much my life was about to twist. How the universe truly loved its sick jokes. The crash had happened. Now the aftermath was about to begin, and it would be far more excruciating than I could ever imagine. The next morning, I dragged myself out of bed. My eyes were bloodshot, my face pale and drawn. I forced myself to put on my best suit. The one Sarah always said made me look sharp. The irony wasn't lost on me. I felt anything but sharp. I felt hollowed out. I arrived at Miller and Associates, a towering glass and steel building downtown, a stark contrast to my modest office. The lobby was all polished marble and hushed tones, the kind of place where fortunes were made and lost. A sleek receptionist directed me to a conference room on the top floor. John Miller, a man whose reputation preceded him, greeted me with a firm handshake and an even firmer gaze. He was a legend in the legal world, known for his relentless pursuit of victory. He introduced me to a few other partners, all sharp, immaculately dressed. They spoke in hushed, serious tones about the case, using words like complex litigation, high stakes, and reputational damage. I nodded, pretending to absorb it all, my mind still a blurry fog of grief and betrayal. I was trying to project an air of competency, but inside, I was screaming. I was a man who had lost everything, now sitting in a room with legal titans, about to be handed the biggest case of my career. And it felt like a cruel, cosmic joke. "All right, let's get down to it," Miller said, his voice cutting through the tension. He gestured to the head of the conference table. "Mr. Davis, meet our client." A man stood up from the far end of the table, turning to face me. He was tall, impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, his hair neatly combed, a confident, almost arrogant smile playing on his lips. His eyes were cold, assessing. My breath hitched. My heart stopped. The world tilted on its axis. It was him, Dr. Julian Richardson, the rich surgeon, the man my wife had left me for. My blood ran cold. The post-it note, the text from Jenny, the endless nights of despair, it all converged into this single horrifying moment. He stood there, radiating success, the very image of the man who had stolen my life. And now he was my client. My mind raced, grappling with the impossible reality. This was a nightmare, a sick, twisted hallucination. My jaw tightened. I felt a surge of nausea, hot and bitter, rise in my throat. I wanted to turn and run, to scream, to punch him in his perfectly symmetrical face. He extended a hand. "Dr. Julian Richardson, you must be Mr. Davis. John here says you are good. We need good. This is a very sensitive matter." I stared at his outstretched hand, unable to move. It was the hand that had held my wife, the hand that performed delicate surgeries, the hand that had somehow, inexplicably, destroyed my marriage. My own hand felt heavy, useless. John Miller cleared his throat, a subtle warning. "Gentlemen, please. Time is of the essence." Took a breath, forcing a mask of professionalism onto my face. It felt like my entire being was screaming in protest. I took his hand. His grip was firm, confident. Mine was weak, clammy. "Mr. Davis," I managed to say, my voice sounding distant, unfamiliar even to my own ears. He didn't recognize me, of course he wouldn't. Why would he? I was just Sarah's husband, a minor inconvenience in his grand, successful life. He wouldn't connect me to the man his new girlfriend had left. And that, in a way, was even worse. It meant I was truly insignificant in his world. Miller began to explain the case. Dr. Richardson was being sued for malpractice. A patient had suffered severe complications, leading to permanent disability after a complex spinal surgery. Patient's family claimed negligence, a rushed procedure, a lack of informed consent. The stakes were incredibly high. Not just money, but Dr. Richardson's reputation, his entire career. My professional brain, despite the turmoil, began to kick in. I listened, absorbing the details, identifying the potential weaknesses in the plaintiff's case, the strengths in Dr. Richardson's defense. This was my job. This was what I did. But every word, every fact, was tainted by the knowledge of who my client was. I kept my gaze fixed on the table, on the documents spread out before us, anything to avoid looking at, but I could feel his presence, his aura of self-importance, his casual confidence that grated on my raw nerves. He spoke occasionally, his voice calm, authoritative, dismissing the accusations against him as baseless, as attempts to extort money. "It was a challenging case," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "Complications can arise. I did everything by the book." I wanted to scream. "You did everything by the book, yet you ruined my life." But I couldn't. I was a lawyer. He was my client. And this was the ultimate test of my professionalism, my self-control. The meeting ended. A whirlwind of legal jargon and strategic planning. Miller and Associates wanted me to lead the defense team. They offered an astronomical fee, more money than I'd ever made on a single case. Enough to cover the coming divorce, enough to start fresh, maybe even enough to forget the posted note for a few hours. Dr. Richardson shook my hand again as he left. "I trust you'll handle this with the utmost discretion, Mr. Davis. My reputation is everything." "Of course, Dr. Richardson," I managed, my voice flat. Discretion. The bitter irony. After he left, Miller clapped me on the shoulder. "Good man, you got this. He's a demanding client, but he pays well. And this is a winnable case, if we play our cards right." I stood there, alone in the opulent conference room, the silence deafening. A winnable case, defending the man who had taken my wife, the man who was now standing between me and financial ruin. My stomach churned. My hands trembled. What was I going to do? Every fiber of my being screamed at me to refuse, to walk away, to burn it all down. But the rational part, the part that remembered the mounting bills, the empty apartment, the humiliation, whispered, "You have to. You need this for yourself, to survive." And maybe, just maybe, a tiny dark voice whispered something else, a chance to be close to him, to see his world, to understand. Maybe even to find a way to make him pay, in a way that the law couldn't touch. Or perhaps to simply prove to myself that I was still capable, still strong, even when my heart was shattered. I took a deep, shaky breath. "I'll take the case." The words felt heavy, binding. The line between my personal and professional life had just ceased to exist. I was about to defend the man I hated most in the world, and it was going to destroy me or make me. I just didn't know which. The first few weeks on the Dr. Richardson case were a blur of forced professionalism and internal screaming. I buried myself in the details, using the sheer volume of work as a shield against the crushing reality of my personal life. Every morning I woke up with a dull ache in my chest, a constant reminder of Sarah and the surgeon. But I pushed it down, deep inside, and put on my lawyer face. My first few meetings with Dr. Richardson were agonizing. He still didn't seem to recognize me, which was both a blessing and a curse. A blessing because I didn't have to explain anything, didn't have to face the inevitable awkwardness or, worse, pity. Curse because it highlighted just how insignificant I was to him. How easily I had been erased from Sarah's life. I observed him closely during these meetings. He was exactly what his public persona suggested. Confident, articulate, highly intelligent. An arrogance that bordered on dismissiveness, especially when discussing the patient or the plaintiff's lawyers. He spoke about his surgeries with a detached precision, almost as if the patient was just a collection of bones and organs, not a human being with a life and a family. Patient suffered complications, he'd state, leaning back in his chair, a casual flick of his wrist. These things happen. We surgeons deal with high risks daily. I'd nod, making notes, pushing down the urge to point out that these things were someone's life, someone's future. I was supposed to be defending him, not judging him. The judgment was there, simmering just below the surface. I started diving into the medical records, a mountain of paper that detailed every aspect of the patient's case. Patient's name was Mrs. Eleanor Vance, a 65-year-old retired teacher. She had suffered from severe chronic back pain and had sought Dr. Richardson's expertise for a complex spinal fusion. The surgery, according to the notes, had initially appeared successful, but post-operative complications had rapidly escalated, leading to irreversible neurological damage and paralysis. Plaintiff's case centered on alleged negligence during the surgery and insufficient post-operative care. They claimed Dr. Richardson had rushed the procedure, citing a packed surgical schedule, and that he had failed to adequately monitor Mrs. Vance in the critical hours following the operation. I spent hours poring over medical textbooks, consulting with forensic medical experts, learning about spinal anatomy and surgical procedures that made my head spin. My office became a war room, covered in diagrams of the human spine, highlighted medical reports, and legal pads filled with my increasingly frantic notes. I interviewed the nurses who had been present during the surgery and in Mrs. Vance's recovery room. They were hesitant, clearly intimidated by Dr. Richardson's reputation. But I pressed gently at first, then more firmly. One nurse, a timid woman named Brenda, recalled Dr. Richardson being under a lot of pressure that day, with multiple surgeries scheduled back to back. She mentioned a momentary lapse, a quick glance at his watch during a critical part of the procedure, but quickly retracted it, saying she must have been mistaken. Her hesitation, however, spoke volumes. Another nurse who had been in post-op mentioned that Dr. Richardson had left the hospital quickly after the surgery, entrusting Mrs. Vance's immediate care to a less experienced resident. She said he was in a hurry to get somewhere important. My mind immediately went to Sarah, to their new life. A cold pang of resentment shot through me. The more I delved into the case, the more complex it became. It wasn't just about a bad outcome. It was about the standard of care, the expectations of patients, and the immense responsibility that came with being a surgeon. Dr. Richardson was undeniably skilled, but was he infallible? Was he always as diligent as he claimed? I had to put aside my personal feelings. My job was to defend Dr. Richardson, to dissect the plaintiff's arguments, to find holes in their narrative, to present my client as a competent, dedicated professional who had done his best in a challenging situation. I had to convince a jury that this was a tragic outcome, not a negligent one. But the human element of the case started to weigh on me. I watched videos of Mrs. Vance taken before her surgery, a vibrant woman laughing with her grandchildren, tending to her garden. And then the videos after, confined to a wheelchair, her voice weak, her eyes filled with a quiet despair. It was heartbreaking. I was defending the man who had caused this. It was a strange dichotomy. On one hand, I was defending the man who had destroyed my life. On the other hand, I was potentially ruining the lives of Mrs. Vance and her family. If I won this case, I was stuck between two moral quandaries, forced to choose a path I didn't want to walk. The irony was not lost on me. I was fighting for the very man who had caused me so much pain, to save his career, his fortune, his reputation. And for what? So I could pay my bills? So I could maintain some semblance of a career. It felt dirty, tainted. One evening, staring at Mrs. Vance's medical chart, I felt a wave of despair wash over me. My apartment was still empty, still haunted by Sarah's absence. The silence was a constant companion. Post-it note was still on my bathroom mirror, a cruel reminder. I thought about Sarah, about how she must be living now with Dr. Richardson, in his opulent home, surrounded by his wealth. Did she ever think about me? Did she feel any regret, any guilt? I doubted it. She had moved on, seamlessly it seemed, into a new, more glamorous life. And I was here sifting through the wreckage of my own, tasked with protecting the very person who had caused. It was a peculiar form of torture, a daily reminder of my brokenness. Yet there was a strange, almost morbid fascination to it. By defending him, I was inextricably linked to him. I was in his world now, even if only professionally. It was a twisted way to stay connected to the life I had lost. As the weeks turned into a month, the date for depositions loomed. I had prepared Dr. Richardson meticulously, going over every possible question the plaintiff's lawyers might ask. He was confident, perhaps too confident. He had an air of invincibility, a belief that his skill and reputation would carry him through. "Just stick to the facts, Doctor," I'd advised him. "No emotions, no speculation. Just what happened." He'd nodded, a dismissive wave of his hand. "Of course, I am a professional, Mr. Davis." I knew he was. But I also knew he was human. And humans, even surgeons, made mistakes. And sometimes those mistakes came with a devastating human cost. And sometimes those costs extended far beyond the operating room, touching lives in ways no one could have predicted. The deposition phase of the Dr. Richardson malpractice suit was where the real drama began to unfold. Not just in the courtroom sense, but personal. It was a grueling process. Endless hours of testimony, cross-examination, and the relentless pursuit of information. I had to prepare Dr. Richardson for his own deposition, which meant spending even more time with him, observing his every nuance. As we went through the prep, his character flaws became glaringly apparent. He was brilliant, no doubt, but he was also deeply arrogant. He bristled at any suggestion that he might have erred. He dismissed the plaintiff's expert witnesses as quacks or jealous. He had an answer for everything, a perfectly crafted response that deflected blame and highlighted his own expertise. The resident made a minor oversight. "Not me," he'd say, referring to the junior doctor who had monitored Mrs. Vance post-op. "I gave clear instructions. My responsibility ends when I leave the operating theater, especially when I delegate." I pushed back. "Doctor, the plaintiff will argue that as the lead surgeon, the ultimate responsibility for your patient's well-being, especially in the immediate post-operative phase, still rests with you, regardless of delegation." He scoffed. "That's absurd. I have other patients, other responsibilities. I can't be everywhere at once." His lack of empathy was chilling. He spoke about Mrs. Vance's paralysis as an unfortunate outcome, rather than a life-altering tragedy. He seemed genuinely incapable of understanding the depth of the family's pain, viewing their lawsuit as a mercenary attempt to extract money rather than a desperate plea for justice. This made my job harder. It's difficult to defend someone you increasingly dislike, someone whose moral compass seems so misaligned with your own. I found myself battling not just the plaintiff's case, but Dr. Richardson's own casual dismissiveness. I had to coach him to sound more sympathetic, to soften his edges, to project an image that was less arrogant and more human. "Doctor, you need to understand that the jury will see you not just as a surgeon, but as a person," I explained. "Your demeanor, your tone, your perceived empathy, it all matters." He just sighed, as if I was wasting his valuable time. "Fine, Mr. Davis, I'll act the part." "It's not an act, Doctor," I corrected him, my voice sharper than I intended. "It's about conveying genuine care for your patient, even when things go wrong." But I knew it was an act for him. Everything was. His charm, his confidence, his success. It was all a performance, a carefully constructed facade to hide what? His own insecurities, his genuine indifference. Then came the day of Dr. Richardson's deposition. Plaintiff's lead attorney, a shrewd, relentless woman named Miss Chen, grilled him for hours. Dr. Richardson was unflappable, sticking to our prepared answers, deflecting every accusation with professional precision. I felt a grudging admiration for his composure, even as I resented him. Then, during a short break, as we were stepping out of the deposition room, it happened. My heart stopped. She was there, standing in the hallway, talking to Miss Chen's junior associate, Sarah. My ex-wife, looking radiant, impossibly beautiful, in a tailored dress and expensive shoes. Her hair was perfectly styled, her smile bright and easy. She looked happy. more relaxed than I had ever seen her. And she was with Dr. Richardson's legal team. It hit me like a tidal wave. She wasn't just his girlfriend. She was involved. Had she connected me to him? Was she here to observe? To gloat? My mind raced, trying to make sense of her presence. Our eyes met across the crowded hallway. Her smile faltered. Her eyes widened. A flicker of surprise, then something else I couldn't quite decipher. Was it guilt? Awkwardness? Pity? I felt a cold rush, followed by a burning heat that spread through my veins. Every memory, every shared moment, every broken promise crashed over me. Post-it note, the empty apartment, the endless nights of silent tears. It all condensed into this one agonizing second. Dr. Richardson, oblivious to the silent drama unfolding beside him, was chatting on his phone, seemingly unaware of Sarah's presence, or the connection between her and me. Sarah, recovering her composure, offered me a small, tight smile, a polite, almost dismissive nod. As if I were a stranger, as if we hadn't shared a decade of our lives. I couldn't speak. My throat was tight, my chest aching. All I could do was stare, my heart hammering against my ribs. She looked away first, turning back to the junior associate, her voice a little too loud, a little too bright. I finally found my voice hoarse and barely audible. "Excuse me for a moment," I mumbled to Dr. Richardson, who just grunted in response. Still on his call. I walked towards Sarah, a puppet on strings drawn by an irresistible, painful force. She saw me coming, her shoulders tensing. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She turned fully, her expression carefully neutral. "David, what are you doing here?" As if she didn't know, as if I hadn't been defending her boyfriend for weeks. "I am handling Dr. Richardson's defense," I said, the words a raw confession of my own personal hell. A flicker of something crossed her face. A shadow of surprise, perhaps, or a fleeting moment of understanding. "Oh, right," I heard. Her voice was soft, devoid of emotion. "You are here supporting him?" I asked, the bitterness thick in my voice. She hesitated. "I am here because he asked me to be, and because I care about him. He's going through a lot." My laugh was short, humorless. "He's going through a lot? What about what I went through, Sarah? What about the post-it note? The empty apartment? The complete destruction of my life?" Her carefully constructed facade cracked. Her eyes showed a flicker of pain, a fleeting moment of vulnerability. "David, please. Not here. This isn't the place." "No, the place was our kitchen, wasn't it? With a yellow post-it note." My voice was rising, and I knew I was losing control, but I didn't care. The years of suppressed pain, the humiliation, the agony, were bubbling to the surface. Dr. Richardson's phone call ended. He looked up, finally noticing Sarah and me. His brow furrowed in confusion, then something close to annoyance. He started to walk towards us. Sarah put a hand on my arm, her touch a cold shock. "David, stop. We can't do this now." "We'll talk later." "Talk later," I scoffed. "When?" "After you've watched me save your boyfriend's career. When you've moved into his mansion and forgotten all about the life we built." Her eyes pleaded with me. "Please, for both our sakes." But it was too late. Dr. Richardson was upon us. He looked from Sarah's strained face to my own contorted one, then back to Sarah. "Is everything all right, darling?" His voice was smooth, possessive. Sarah quickly pulled her hand away from me. "Yes, Julian." Just a colleague. From David's old firm. She threw me a desperate look. I stared at her, then at him. He still hadn't made the connection. The arrogance of it. The sheer obliviousness. It was infuriating. "Mr. Davis," Dr. Richardson said. His tone sharper now, sensing the tension. "We need to get back to the deposition. Miss Chen is waiting." I looked at Sarah one last time, her face a mask of carefully controlled emotion. Then I turned and walked back into the deposition room, leaving them standing there. The rest of the deposition was a blur. My mind was reeling. Sarah was here. She was involved. She was living with him, supporting him. The man I was defending, the man who had taken everything from me. The layers of absurdity, of pain, of cosmic irony were almost unbearable. The sight of her, so happy, so put together, while my own life felt like a jagged pile of broken glass, was a fresh wound. I had to defend him. I had to spend countless hours with him, strategizing, protecting his future. And now, she was a part of that future. It was a hell of my own making, a gilded cage I had willingly stepped in. The legal fight was just beginning, but the personal battle had just escalated to an unbearable level. Preparing for trial was a whirlwind. My encounter with Sarah in the hallway had thrown me, but I forced myself to compartmentalize. My personal agony stayed locked away, while my professional drive took over. I needed to win this case not just for Dr. Richardson, but for my own sanity, to prove that I was still capable, still a formidable lawyer, even when my world had been ripped apart. I delved deeper into Dr. Richardson's past, his surgical history, looking for any weaknesses the plaintiff might exploit. Reports of hurried consultations, a few complaints dismissed about his bedside manner. Nothing concrete enough to win the malpractice suit for the plaintiff, but enough to paint a picture of a surgeon who prioritized efficiency over patient connection, profit over presence. I confronted him with these findings. "Doctor, they'll try to show a pattern of you rushing, of you being detached. We need to prepare for that," he scoffed. "They're grasping at straws. My success rate is excellent. These are minor criticisms easily explained away." His arrogance was a liability. He genuinely seemed to believe he was above reproach, infallible. It made my job infuriatingly difficult. I had to constantly rein him in to manage his expectations, to make him understand that the jury wouldn't see him as a god, but as a man. And that man was being accused of negligence that had ruined a life. I even started to see how Sarah might have been initially drawn to him. His absolute confidence, his aura of success, his decisive nature. He seemed like a man who always knew what he wanted and how to get it. A stark contrast perhaps to my own, more cautious, deliberative nature. But I also saw the flip side, his coldness, his self-absorption, his inability to truly connect on a human level. Was this what Sarah had traded? Comfortable, loving, but perhaps stifling life for a life of superficial glamour and emotional emptiness. The thought offered a strange, hollow comfort. The trial date arrived, looming like a thundercloud. The courtroom was packed. Local news crews were there, buzzing. Mrs. Vance's case had garnered significant attention, a David and Goliath story of a paralyzed teacher against a powerful, wealthy surgeon. The air was thick with anticipation. I walked into the courtroom, my suit pressed, my briefcase heavy with documents. My stomach was a knot of nerves, but a different kind of nerves than usual. This wasn't just about a legal battle. It was about my life playing out on a public stage. I saw her, Sarah, sitting in the front row of the gallery next to Dr. Richardson's sister. She was there to support him. She caught my eye for a fleeting moment, a brief acknowledgement that held 1,000 unspoken words. Then she looked away, focusing on Dr. Richardson as he walked in, all confidence and poise. He didn't even glance at me, already in his public persona. The trial began. Plaintiff's opening statement was powerful. Miss Chen painting a vivid picture of Mrs. Vance's pre-surgery life, her hopes for recovery, and the devastating impact of the alleged negligence. She presented Mrs. Vance as a beloved grandmother, a dedicated educator, now confined to a wheelchair, her life irrevocably changed. Mrs. Vance herself was there, frail and stoic, her presence a silent accusation. The jury was visibly moved. Then it was my turn. I stood, walked to the podium, and began my opening statement. I focused on the inherent risks of complex spinal surgery, the diligent efforts of Dr. Richardson, the unforeseen complications that can arise even with the best care. I emphasized his stellar record, his groundbreaking work, his dedication to his profession. I painted him as a brilliant, compassionate surgeon who had done everything within his power to help Mrs. Vance. But that sometimes, despite all efforts, tragedies occurred. I felt the weight of my words, the burden of defending a man I personally despised. But I was a lawyer. This was my job, and I was good at it. I had to be. My career, my future depended on it. The first few days of testimony were grueling. Expert witnesses for the plaintiff dissected every moment of Dr. Richardson's surgery, pointing out perceived errors, omissions, and rushed decisions. I cross-examined them relentlessly, poking holes in their theories, highlighting their biases, questioning their expertise. I saw the doubt flicker in the jurors' eyes, a small victory. Dr. Richardson, sitting at the defense table, remained impassive, occasionally whispering a note to me. He was playing the part I had coached him on, appearing calm and professional. But I could feel his underlying tension, his fury at being challenged. Then came Mrs. Vance's testimony. It was heartbreaking. She spoke in a quiet, trembling voice, describing her pain, her loss of independence, the simple joys she could no longer experience. She choked back tears as she spoke of her grandchildren, of not being able to dance at their weddings. The courtroom was silent, captivated. Even I, despite my professional detachment, felt a pang of profound sadness. During cross-examination, I had to be careful. I couldn't appear unsympathetic. I asked gentle questions, focusing on the informed consent form she had signed, acknowledging the risks. I elicited admissions that she understood the surgery was complex and not without potential complication. It was a delicate dance, trying to mitigate her emotional impact without appearing callous. But it was when Dr. Richardson himself took the stand that the true test came. I led him through his testimony, detailing his experience, his meticulous approach to surgery, his care for Mrs. Vance. He spoke confidently, eloquently, presenting himself as the consummate professional. Then Miss Chen began her cross-examination. She was relentless, chipping away at his composure, bringing up the earlier patient complaints, the reports of hurried schedules. She pressed him on the momentary lapse the nurse had mentioned. The glance at his watch. Dr. Richardson bristled. "I am always focused on my patient, Miss Chen. My schedule has no bearing on my precision." But his voice was tightening. His carefully constructed facade was starting to crack. He was becoming defensive, arrogant, exactly what I had warned him against. I watched the jury, seeing their expressions shift, a flicker of doubt. Then Miss Chen asked the question that made my blood run cold. "Dr. Richardson, on the day of Mrs. Vance's surgery, was it true that you had a significant personal engagement immediately following the procedure? One that required your swift departure from the hospital?" My heart leaped into my throat. This was it. The link to Sarah. The reason he had rushed. I shot him a warning look, a subtle shake of my head, telling him to deny it, to deflect. But Dr. Richardson, fueled by his own arrogance and perhaps a strange desire to assert his personal life, looked directly at the jury and said, "Yes, Miss Chen, I had a dinner engagement. A very important one. But it did not in any way affect my surgical performance." A ripple went through the courtroom. He had admitted it, the important engagement. Sarah. He had prioritized her that night over the lingering post of care of a critical patient. My hands clenched under the table. The jury wouldn't see it as a minor detail. They would see it as a reason for negligence. Miss Chen smiled, a predatory gleam in her eyes. "So, doctor, you admit that you were rushing, that your mind might have been elsewhere, on this very important engagement, while Mrs. Vance lay vulnerable on your operating table?" "No," Dr. Richardson retorted, his voice sharp with indignation. "My focus is always on my patient. My personal life does not interfere with my professional duties." But the damage was done. His denial rang hollow. The jury had seen his arrogance, his lack of true concern. And I knew, with a sickening certainty, that my client had just sealed his own fate. My ex-wife's new boyfriend, the rich surgeon, had just shot himself in the foot, and there was nothing I could do to stop it. Trial was far from over, but the turning point had arrived, and it was devastating. The revelation that Dr. Richardson had indeed been rushing for a very important engagement sent a jolt through the courtroom. Miss Chen, sensing blood in the water, pressed him further, painting a picture of a surgeon so consumed by his personal life and packed schedule that he neglected his ultimate duty to his patient. Dr. Richardson, flustered and defensive, dug himself deeper, his arrogance shining through, alienating the jury with every dismissive retort. I watched him, a mix of professional frustration and personal vindication simmering within me. He was doing my enemy's job for them. He was proving to the jury exactly what I had known about him all along. He put himself first. And Sarah, my ex-wife, sitting in the gallery, looked increasingly uncomfortable, her gaze fixed on the floor. She had to be seeing it too, the true measure of the man she had chosen. Finally, Dr. Richardson's cross-examination ended. He stepped down, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. I knew we were in trouble. The jury's perception of him had shifted dramatically. They no longer saw a brilliant, compassionate surgeon, but a rushed, arrogant one. The rest of the trial moved quickly. Both sides presented their closing arguments, trying to sway the jury one last time. Miss Chen delivered a powerful emotional plea for Mrs. Vance, emphasizing the human cost of negligence. I in turn tried to salvage what was left of Dr. Richardson's credibility, reiterating the complexities of the surgery and the inherent risks. I focused on the lack of direct, irrefutable evidence of negligence, arguing that while the outcome was tragic, It wasn't necessarily a result of professional misconduct. It was a tough sell. The jury deliberated for 3 days, 3 agonizing days where every phone call, every email sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I spent the time reviewing my notes, playing out different scenarios, trying to predict the outcome. Mostly I thought about Sarah and Dr. Richardson and the twisted path that had led me to this moment. On the 3rd day, the call came. The jury had reached a verdict. I walked into the courtroom, my heart pounding. The air was thick with tension. Mrs. Vance sat with her family, their faces etched with anxiety and hope. Dr. Richardson sat beside me, his usual confidence replaced by a nervous fidgeting, his face pale. Sarah was there in her usual seat, her eyes fixed on me, then on Dr. Richardson. The bailiff called the court to order. The jury filed in, their faces unreadable. The foreperson handed the verdict form to the clerk, who in turn handed it to the judge. The judge read it silently, then passed it to the clerk for reading aloud. In the case of Vance versus Richardson, the clerk began, her voice clear and resonant. On the matter of professional negligence, we, the jury, find for the plaintiff, Mrs. Eleanor Vance. A collective gasp went through the courtroom. Mrs. Vance's family burst into quiet tears of relief. Dr. Richardson sagged in his chair, his face losing all color. Sarah gasped, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with shock. However, the clerk continued, on the matter of damages for gross negligence, we, the jury, find for the defendant, Dr. Julian Richardson. Courtroom fell silent again, confused murmurs rippling through the gallery. The verdict was split. It wasn't a complete win for either side. The jury had found Dr. Richardson negligent, meaning he was responsible for Mrs. Vance's injuries and would have to pay damages. But they had not found him grossly negligent, which would have implied a much higher degree of culpability and potentially career-ending consequences, not to mention punitive damages. It was a partial victory, a nuanced outcome. Dr. Richardson would likely face a substantial financial penalty. His reputation would be tarnished, but his career as a surgeon was not entirely over. He had been held accountable, but not entirely destroyed. The judge thanked the jury and dismissed them. The courtroom erupted in a low buzz. Mrs. Vance's family, though emotional, seemed to accept the verdict as a measure of justice. Dr. Richardson pushed his chair back, standing slowly. His face was a mask of shock and disbelief. Negligent. They found me negligent. His voice was a raw whisper. Yes, doctor, I said, my voice flat, but not grossly negligent. It means you'll pay damages, but you can appeal, and your license isn't automatically revoked. It's not the worst outcome. He looked at me, truly looked at me for the first time. There was no arrogance in his eyes, only a raw, wounded pride. He didn't thank me. He just nodded curtly, then turned and walked away, his shoulders slumped. Sarah rushed to his side, her face filled with concern. She put a comforting hand on his arm, whispering something to him. He shook his head, then walked out of the courtroom, leaving her behind. Sarah stood there for a moment, looking after him, then slowly turned, her gaze meeting mine. Her eyes were clouded with emotion. She walked towards me slowly, as if unsure whether to approach. "David," she said, her voice soft, tentative. "Sarah," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion. "It's over." "I know," she whispered. She looked at the empty spot where Dr. Richardson had been. "He's devastated." I just looked at her. "He'll be fine. He's rich. He's a surgeon. He'll rebuild." Mrs. Vance's life, though, is still shattered. She flinched. "I know that. I am sorry, David." "About all of it, are you?" I asked, a sliver of the old pain, the old bitterness returning. Or are you just sorry he got caught? Her eyes filled with tears. Number, I am sorry I hurt you. I really am. She paused, then added, He's not. He's not what I thought he was, David. I watched her, a strange calmness settling over me. Power he had over me. The crushing weight of his betrayal was lessening. The verdict, in a strange way, had liberated me. He wasn't the invincible figure I had built him up to be. He was just a man, flawed and fallible, capable of making mistakes, both professional and personal. Doesn't matter, Sarah, I said, my voice quiet but firm. It's too late for apologies. She nodded, tears finally spilling down her cheeks. I know. She looked around the emptying courtroom, then back at me. I hope you find peace, David. I am working on it, I said. You should too. She gave me a small, sad smile, a ghost of the woman I had once loved. Then she turned and walked away, out of the courtroom, out of my life, hopefully for good this time. I stood there for a long time, watching the last of the people leave. The room was silent now, save for the hum of the air conditioning. The intensity of the trial, the raw emotion, the public spectacle, it was all over. The past few months had been a living hell. I had defended the man who stole my wife, had seen his arrogance, his flaws, had faced my ex-wife in a crucible of my own making, and now it was done. I felt exhausted, but also lighter. The weight that had been crushing me since that Tuesday, since that posted note, was finally starting to lift. I hadn't won a resounding victory for Dr. Richardson, but I hadn't lost either. I had done my job. I had navigated the impossible. I had faced my demons, not just the professional ones, but the deeply personal one. I picked up my briefcase, the weight of the documents feeling different now, less oppressive. I walked out of the courtroom, out of the building, into the late afternoon sun. The city hummed around me, vibrant and alive. My life hadn't ended on a Tuesday. It had merely been brutally, painfully reshaped. I didn't know what the future held. The divorce was still pending, my apartment still felt empty. But I had faced the man who broke me, and I had survived. I had upheld my duty, even when it felt impossible. And in that, there was a strange, hard-won victory. I was still standing. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a faint flicker of hope, a tiny spark of a new beginning on the horizon.